At the exact moment when I was concentrating on repairing the antique grandfather clock, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it from my pocket and saw an unfamiliar number. Worried it might be a sales call, I picked up. "May I speak to Jack Thompson?" a formal voice asked. I confirmed that I was indeed Jack Thompson. "Please wait for Mrs. Karen Thompson," the voice commanded. Instead, I chose to end the call. As expected, within a minute there was another ring. "Mr. Thompson, apologies for the disconnection. Please wait for Mrs. Thompson." Again, I ended the call. Soon the phone rang once more, and I picked up. A frustrated tone was evident from the caller as she tried to explain the situation. I cut her off. "Please tell Karen that I'm not interested in speaking with her today or any other day." After hanging up, I attempted to return to my task, but in 5 minutes the phone rang again. Recognizing the number from the earlier attempts, I let it go to voicemail. The notification that I had a voicemail didn't tempt me to check it. By then I had made up my mind about my project and started to organize my materials. The phone's ringing once more broke the peace, prompting me to switch it off. One of the initial lessons I learned about using woodworking tools was the importance of focus. It wasn't just safer, but helped time fly. Now I was positioning the walnut inlay pieces I had carved to replace the damaged sections on the clock's face. Using my magnifying lamp, I confirmed everything was aligned and began to apply the wood glue, securing each piece with delicate clamps. After reviewing my work and deeming it satisfactory, I stood back to admire the clock. On its own, it didn't look impressive in the cramped back workshop of my hardware store, but I had repaired the damaged face in just 2 hours. At this rate, I could finish the entire restoration by evening, moving closer to returning it to Mrs. Abernathy, who would be delighted to have her family heirloom functioning again. I was relieved that earlier tasks like repairing the movement mechanism and replacing the worn gears were completed successfully. So I planned to finish the face restoration tonight, polish the brass components on Saturday, and rebalance the pendulum on Sunday. This would earn me my weekend treat, a 6-pack of beer chilling in my refrigerator. It amazed me that in a few days, this restoration project would be complete. It was also a reflection of how I had limited my beer consumption to a single 6-pack per weekend, 2 beers a day after finishing my daily chores. Not long ago, a 6-pack was merely the start of a night of heavy drinking. This change was all thanks to Mrs. Thompson, Karen, my ex-wife. I couldn't help but feel bitter towards Karen, wondering how someone I had been so deeply in love with could become such a nuisance. I pushed myself to concentrate again on my task. The more I worked, the less time I would have to think. The quicker I would finish, allowing me to dive into a warm shower and then drink the 2 bottles before heading off to sleep. If I was fortunate, there would be no dreams. That was the essence of my life these days, finding ways to keep busy so there wouldn't be any time for sorrow. It was a terrible way to exist, but it was better than feeling like dying every single day. With that final thought in mind, I started to prepare the brass components for polishing. Hours later, I trudged upstairs to my apartment above the store for my drinks and a warm shower before bed. When I woke up, I remembered to switch my cell phone back on. 20 missed calls and voicemail messages, all from the same person as the day before. I deleted all the messages without listening to whatever demands Karen's assistants thought were important. As I got dressed, I was uplifted by the thought that I wouldn't be disturbed over the weekend. I went on my computer and addressed a few urgent business matters. I sent out several emails about special orders and supply deliveries, then went downstairs. A quick visit to the small kitchenette in the back of the store gave me my bowl of Wheaties, and I ate my breakfast of champions with a sigh. I went back to the workshop, put on my protective glasses, and began polishing the clock's brass pendulum and weights. I had a portable radio set to a classic rock station, which helped me pass the time, mixing the music with the sounds of my work and the occasional curse word. By mid-afternoon, I had finished polishing all the brass components and went upstairs to make a sandwich. As I consumed the turkey sandwich, I gazed outside at the dreary, rainy November day. It reminded me of another rainy November day last year. I recalled standing soaked outside my in-laws' house after arriving in Davenport on Thanksgiving morning for what was meant to be a surprise visit. I certainly had not received an invitation from my wife, kids, or in-laws. When the door opened, I saw the shocked expression on my brother-in-law's face. Before he could offer any weak excuse, I walked past him into the lively atmosphere of the house, which instantly became silent at my arrival. My 14-year-old son Matt looked at the ground, while Emily, my 17-year-old daughter, quickly left the room. My wife, Karen, got up from the lap of a stranger who had been holding her closely. Despite her embarrassment, she tried to downplay the situation by introducing me to Brad Wilson, the stranger. He stood up and offered his hand, but I just looked at him until he withdrew it. Meanwhile, my dear mother-in-law hurried into the room to ensure nothing dramatic happened. At least I thought I was making her carpet wet as rain continued to drip from my trench coat. "Why, Jack, we weren't expecting you. When did you get here?" I heard the woman, whom I considered a witch, say. I ignored her as I attempted to meet my wife's gaze, but she seemed to find something extremely interesting on her mother's wall and refused to look at me. I returned to the entrance and stepped outside, then took out my mobile phone to dial the taxi company, hoping I would be able to hail the same taxi that had just left me before it went too far. Nobody from the house emerged to convince me to remain. I let out a sigh as the distressing recollection concluded. I made my way back to the workshop to finish assembling the clock. The task progressed swiftly. I carefully installed the restored face, reattached the polished hands, and secured the glass front panel. The solid tick-tock as I wound it for a test run was deeply satisfying, a sound of order and precision that had been absent from my life for too long. I was content that I had prepared so meticulously, ending up with just a few small wood scraps and some excess polish. I transported these to the storage room and filed them away for later use. After connecting the pendulum and setting the time, I verified that each mechanism was functioning correctly. It might not seem like a major achievement, but restoring a 150-year-old grandfather clock was no small feat for now. A shower beckoned me. The hot water eased my sore muscles as I reveled in the steam. This was in stark contrast to the bone chill and cold I experienced returning to Quad City Airport the previous Thanksgiving. I was both physically and mentally frozen as I arranged for a flight home, regardless of the expense. I knew my marriage was over. I just didn't know when a formal end would come. I dried off and chose to go to bed, looking forward to another lengthy but fulfilling day. I fell asleep almost instantly. On Sunday morning, I awoke to the sound of a thunderstorm brewing outside. I put on my jeans, work boots, and a t-shirt and headed downstairs, hoping we wouldn't lose electricity during the day. I tuned the radio to a sports channel to listen to the game while I began the final balancing adjustments on the grandfather clock. I had thought about installing a newer movement mechanism, but opted for restoring the original due to its historical value. The parts were ready on my workbench. I waited for my coffee to brew before starting the delicate task of adjusting the escapement for perfect timing. As efficiently as possible, I listed the equipment I would need for next week's projects, including some special order items for Old Man Jenkins' kitchen renovation. The smaller tools like wrenches, screwdrivers, hammers, and measuring tapes were already well stocked. I went to the front of the store to brew a fresh pot of coffee. I surveyed the recently reorganized display area I had completed a month prior. Bright LED lighting illuminated the entire space, and the neatly arranged tools gleamed on their hooks. I positioned myself behind the counter, next to the new key-cutting machine I had invested in. The new modular shelving units I constructed brought a more organized atmosphere to the store, allowing me to group items by project type rather than just by category. All I needed to do was remove a non-functional checkout counter, greatly enlarging the overall display area, even adding more shelves and a DIY project consultation corner. The space still seemed too large for the dwindling foot traffic, but I ultimately installed a small coffee station with free coffee for customers, which provided the perfect finishing touch to create a more welcoming atmosphere. The idea of coffee reminded me of how I met Karen, and my thoughts wandered back in time. It was at a freshman orientation gathering at a local coffee shop at our community college. I didn't really want to attend, but my roommate convinced me. I was there sipping on my coffee when I noticed a tall, dark-haired woman nearby. She had an athletic build, long-toned legs, and an incredible figure, and she was being bothered by a drunken guy. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but whatever it was, it earned him a slap across his face. Before he could retaliate, I stepped in between them to prevent him from attacking her. This didn't stop his anger as he tried to reach her, but I kept myself between them as he pushed me around in every direction he could. Eventually, the security staff arrived and took the man away. I turned and found myself gazing into the most beautiful green eyes I had ever seen. She introduced herself as Karen, and I told her my name was Jack. We chatted for a while, then she had to leave, and I thought that was the last I'd see of her. A month later, as I was crossing the campus, I heard someone shouting at me. This frantic woman, dressed in a worn outfit with Greek letters emblazoned on the front, ran up to me and asked, "Hi, do you have a pen?" My shocked expression made her explain that she needed it for a sorority initiation task. I could only nod and blush as I took out the pen I had been carrying, handed it to her, and she ran off excitedly to her sorority. Watching her run, I saw that stunning figure vanish. Another month went by, and as the campus geared up for homecoming, I was walking back to my dorm when someone began walking alongside me. "Hi, ready to save me for the third time?" she asked. I was puzzled and asked, "How can I save you this time?" She explained she needed to avoid going to homecoming with an undesirable date from a brother fraternity by having a date with someone else. Despite my sarcastic reply hinting at my bruised ego, she didn't catch on and told me where to meet her. Confused, I walked away, recounted the event to my roommate, who encouraged me to accept the date, cheekily suggesting I might get lucky. Despite his optimism, luck wasn't on my side. Instead, Karen and I spent the day getting to know each other, ignoring our inept football team and chatting through the game. After we exited the stadium, we opted to visit a tiny cafe to prolong our discussion. We were so engrossed that we didn't notice the establishment was closing until it was time to leave. On the way back to her place, I hesitated, unsure whether to attempt to kiss Karen. Karen made the decision for me by saying goodnight and departing without so much as a light kiss on the cheek. I interpreted this as a sign that I hadn't impressed her as I made my way back to my dorm. Upon arrival, I discovered my roommate was absent. I had gotten used to him not showing up until Sunday night. I lay on my bed and quickly fell asleep, Karen's green eyes haunting my thoughts. Over the next month, I attempted to contact Karen, only to find out she was never available. Eventually, I heard she had begun seeing someone else. I was disheartened, feeling like I had missed my chance before it even began. A loud thunderclap interrupted my daydreams of Karen, and I resumed working on the grandfather clock, carefully adjusting the pendulum length to ensure accurate timekeeping. I partially paid attention to the game on the radio, pausing only to refill my coffee when necessary. After finishing the adjustments, I admired how well the restored clock looked, eager to deliver it to Mrs. Abernathy tomorrow. All that remained was to package it for transport and prepare the invoice. Today I planned to celebrate. The business week was about to start, and I would devote my days to running the store. In the evenings, I might tackle minor chores around the apartment, saving my weekends for more substantial restoration projects. That Friday, I visited the regional supplier warehouse to pick up some specialty hinges and cabinet pulls, loading them onto my work truck along with various grades of sandpaper for upcoming projects. Throughout the week, I had carefully identified the items I needed to restock, noting which products were selling well despite the competition from the new ValueMart superstore that had opened at the edge of town 6 months ago. My phone rang, another call from Karen's office. Calls from her had become frequent over the past week, leading me to add the number to speed dial for quick recognition. This reminded me of a call I received on a Friday long ago while studying in the dorm. Assuming it was for my already departed roommate, I answered, prepared to relay a message. "Where the hell are you?" the caller demanded. Taken aback, I inquired who it was. "It's Karen." "Now, where the hell are you?" she retorted, clearly agitated. "Annoyed?" I replied, questioning why she would expect to know my whereabouts. "Just come over here, pronto," she insisted. Despite my reservations, the prospect of seeing her swayed me, and I found myself at her sorority house shortly after. Announcing myself, I waited and soon observed Karen vigorously arguing with a guy. Their dispute seemed intense, and her pointing at me elicited a disdainful glance from him. She hurried outside, announcing we needed to leave, and led me away. After a while, I halted, asking for an explanation. She angrily informed me that the same fraternity guy was troubling her again, bewildering me as to how this was my issue. I inquired if she expected me to fight him. She retorted, "Why didn't you phone your boyfriend?" I pivoted and departed, finding myself back at the cafe where we had celebrated our homecoming date. She entered and settled next to me, initiating conversation, and before I realized it, I was no longer upset. Then she expressed her desire to date me, albeit with a minor condition. "Look, I find you appealing, but I'm not prepared to commit exclusively to one person. Hence, I wish to date you and others. If we're truly meant for each other, we'll both sense it. Can you accept that?" The thought of sharing her was unappealing to me. Then she leaned in for a kiss, and I understood I was hopelessly captivated. At times, I managed to secure a date with her, while other times I'd sulk in my room, agonizing over her being with others. After 4 months, we became intimate, deepening my affection. Despite my efforts to persuade her, she persisted in seeing other people. This perplexing carousel continued for 2 more years until one day she approached me with news. "I'm pregnant." Time froze. She assured me it was mine, anticipating my next move. Internally, I was panicking. With 1 more year till my business administration degree and a promising career, proposing to Karen seemed premature. Karen aimed to complete her education degree and proceed to a teaching position, extending our education by at least 2 more years. Suddenly, our plans needed revision. We deliberated and decided on a discreet wedding. I would work to support her through her teaching certification, and once employed, she would support me through finishing my degree. We envisioned a future of bliss. Then turmoil ensued. Her mother, whom I dubbed the evil witch of the North, berated me for disrupting her daughter's life, relentlessly harassing me thereafter. My grandfather, who had taught me the hardware business, only demanded that I learn to manage the family store, which I was to inherit. Karen was initially furious, but acquiesced after pressure from her mother to secure her future. We proceeded with our modest, necessary wedding and began cohabitating. That final school year was challenging, with Karen's pregnancy and my array of odd jobs to sustain us. From stocking shelves at my grandfather's store to minor repairs and contract work, no job was beneath me if it contributed financially. Despite hardships, we graduated. Karen welcomed our daughter Emily into the world and was hired at the local elementary school. Her mother adorned her home with graduation and baby photos, excluding me. I secured a position at my grandfather's hardware store, undertaking various tasks, but my persistence paid off, earning me the assistant manager position. As my proficiency and income grew, so did our expenses, with Karen finding new ways to deplete every earned penny. In her 3rd year of teaching, she announced another pregnancy. 8 months later, our son Matt arrived. Now I was tasked with caring for a newborn, a 3-year-old, and a wife focused on her career advancement. Despite the frustrations from Karen or her mother, I maintained my composure, understanding the importance of supporting Karen's aspirations. While she spent time with her colleagues, on several occasions, I would briefly accompany them when they decided to unwind at a local bar. I always departed early to care for our children and to give Karen some personal time. My priorities were not well received by some of the more competitive male members of the staff, who took pleasure in mocking me in Karen's presence. I was tempted to confront them physically, but I understood the negative effect it could have on Karen. Thus, I suppressed my frustration and acted as though I was unaware of being the target of their mockery. Eventually, the day came when my grandfather passed away, and I inherited the hardware store. Watching the passing of ownership with my children in my arms filled me with pride. Karen radiated happiness as she introduced me to numerous teachers and administrators before leaving to join a celebration party at the opening of a new restaurant in town. She did not return home until 10 the next morning, explaining that she had stayed at a friend's place after feeling overwhelmed. I argued that she should have contacted me for a ride home, which led to an argument loud enough to upset our children, requiring me to spend hours soothing them. I chose to overlook the incident, considering the situation was already resolved and wanting to avoid distressing our children further. If I thought running the store was demanding, then preparing for the school district's annual review was truly grueling. Karen and her colleagues dedicated themselves entirely to their preparation, day and night, for weeks in anticipation of the evaluation that could determine promotions. I supported her in any way I could, from foot massages to late-night ice cream runs. Karen excelled, achieving recognition from the superintendent. She quickly secured a well-paying administrative position at the district office, prompting our move to a larger home. I had planned to renovate the living quarters above the hardware store, but was persuaded to postpone this ambition. Karen argued that maximizing our comfort was crucial as she aimed for a principalship at one of the schools. She assured me that once she achieved this, we would be financially secure. She convinced me of the importance of establishing an impressive home to begin building our social standing. I soon discovered Karen's unilateral approach to our finances, reminiscent of Joseph Stalin's philosophy. What was hers remained hers, and what was mine was open for discussion. I was tasked with covering all our expenses, from mortgage and car payments to household bills, student loans, and more. In contrast, Karen's earnings remained a mystery, as every attempt to discuss her contributions led to heated arguments. We spent several years in this arrangement before ValueMart announced plans to open a superstore in Oak Ridge. I proposed renovating the hardware store to specialize in services and expertise the big box couldn't match. Karen dismissed the idea, likening the old store to something out of a history museum. Despite my assurance that it could be refurbished within our budget, I believe her resistance was partly due to lingering resentment over my grandfather's insistence on me taking over the family business. Instead, Karen chose to associate with the school board members and town officials who welcomed the development. I pleaded with her to think it over, but she was determined and against my desires. I ended up reducing inventory and cutting staff to compete on price, a battle I couldn't win against a corporate giant. Once more, I struggled to make ends meet, barely managing to pay our bills each month. The tension was straining our relationship as she started to belittle me in front of our kids. The breaking point came when the house began to deteriorate, and home repairs became necessary. I couldn't afford the extensive renovations Karen demanded, yet was reluctant to approach her for financial help. I felt trapped. My latest business evaluation indicated I had lost 30% of my customers, suggesting I was trapped in a downward spiral without prospects for growth. I sat down with Karen to discuss our dire financial situation, showing her the sales reports, despite feeling embarrassed. Yet again, she dismissed my concerns with scorn, claiming her mother had always been right about me. Feeling defeated, I remained seated as she walked away. The following day, she proposed a solution. Her district was looking for someone to serve as an interim administrator at a problematic school in Davenport, 50 miles away. Rumor had it that whoever took on the task would likely become the next principal. She and the kids would stay with her mother while I stayed behind to fix our mess. Despite my frustration, I refrained from lashing out. It saddened me that the kids were not particularly distressed about being away from me. They were actually excited about moving to Davenport and being pampered by their grandmother. Saying goodbye at the bus station was heart-wrenching for me, while they seemed keen to go. I returned home and wept. The next day, I met with my bank to present my business survival plan, but they outright dismissed it, imposing strict conditions I had to meet to maintain my loans. Despite the brief respite from my family's departure, I was still barely keeping afloat financially. I started with the easy tasks that required minimal expense and tackled them first before moving on to the more complicated ones. It felt like for every task I completed, 2 new problems arose, and my resentment towards the money pit I inhabited grew. My attempts to reach my family were met with brief conversations before they hurriedly ended the calls. I started drinking excessively, which was noticed by my few remaining regular customers, but at that point, I didn't care. Time passed until the winter holidays approached. I asked Karen if she could return so we could spend time together as a family, but she said her schedule wouldn't allow it. I then suggested visiting them, but she insisted my focus should be on fixing the business rather than spending on travel. Moreover, Karen hinted that her family would be away for Thanksgiving, so my visit wouldn't make sense. However, Emily excitedly mentioned the family gathering at her grandmother's, and Matt shared his anticipation for attending a football game at the local stadium with his uncle on Thanksgiving. Something didn't add up, and I reached my limit with the situation. I resolved to travel to Davenport, where I uncovered answers to questions I hadn't even considered, such as the ease with which I could be replaced. The most painful revelation came when I tried to reconnect with Emily and Matt after returning home, leaving numerous messages in vain, begging them to get in touch. They never returned my calls. 2 weeks after Emily's 18th birthday, I received a big manila envelope in the mail. Emily had applied in Scott County to change her name from Emily Thompson to Emily Wilson. She wanted to adopt the surname of her dad, Brad Wilson, regional manager for ValueMart. Included were sworn statements from Emily Thompson and Brad Wilson claiming they had a father-daughter relationship since Emily was a child, which was verified by Karen's statement that Brad had been a significant part of their lives since Emily was young. Also included was the judge's order officially approving the name change. At that moment, I understood that when Matt turned 18, I would receive a similar shock. Then Karen called me. She inquired if I had gotten a package in the mail, and I confirmed that I had. She mentioned that the package was meant for her mother, but a clerical error caused it to be sent to me. She informed me that the clerk was dismissed for the mistake. No, Karen, I'm the one who has been making mistakes. The issue is I've been making them for over 20 years. I ended the call. Soon after, I was served with divorce papers. Although she earned more, she argued that I didn't deserve a fair share of our joint assets. What was hers remained hers, and what was mine stayed mine, except for the house. Despite never contributing financially to the house, she expected to receive half of its value when sold. In essence, I would lose $200,000. I wondered about her reaction when she received the property settlement agreement signed by me without objection. I then took some time to focus on the hardware store, noticing the potential for specialized services that ValueMart couldn't match. I felt a spark of determination, knowing tomorrow I would begin implementing my plan to focus on craft restoration, custom repairs, and DIY workshops. The new business direction would complement the changing neighborhood, with its influx of young couples buying and renovating the older homes. I opened a beer and toured the store, noting small tasks still pending, all manageable. I realized I needed another significant project to occupy my time and started considering options. Standing at the store's front window overlooking the small town square, an idea struck me: a renovation center with tool rentals, repair services, and workshop space. Excited by the planning and permits required, I envisioned this project filling my summer. Imagining various layout designs, I estimated potential expenses. Then I heard the sound of struggling and shouting from across the street. I saw a large U-Haul truck with a trailer attempting to back into the vacant storefront driveway. The driver struggled, resulting in the trailer getting stuck in the wet yard. Wheels spinning fruitlessly, I rushed outside, tapped on the driver's window, surprising her. She looked at me bewildered as she juggled solving her dilemma and calming 2 young children in the front seat, tears streaming down her face. I inquired if she required assistance, and the expression of relief on her face warmed my heart as she tearfully agreed. I opened the door and handed her my umbrella. She hurried to the passenger side, unbuckled the children, and guided them to the shelter provided by the storefront's awning. I climbed into the driver's seat, adjusted the steering, and shifted into low gear. I gently pressed the accelerator to prevent the rear wheels from spinning and cautiously moved forward to escape the mud. To accomplish this, I had to navigate through more of the storefront's small lawn, but it seemed like the simplest approach. Eventually, I maneuvered the truck and trailer back onto the road, prepared for another effort. Driving a vehicle with a trailer attached is an unfamiliar task for many. The trick to backing up with a trailer is to steer in the opposite direction you would typically reverse. Gradually, I directed the trailer up the driveway until both the trailer and truck were positioned properly, ready for unloading. I switched off the engine and dashed, bent over to avoid the rain, onto the sidewalk under the awning. The children cheered, and a wide smile appeared on the face of the blonde angel. At that moment, I realized I preferred her smiling over crying. "Here are the keys," I said as I handed them to her, placing them in her tiny hand. "Thank you so much for your help." I was at a loss about what to do next. Her voice carried the sweetest southern accent imaginable. "I'm always happy to assist a neighbor. My name's Jack Thompson. I presume you're my new neighbor." "Oh, pardon my manners. I'm Sarah Lee, and these two rascals are Katie and Billy." Her introduction led to a wave of objections from the children, who then clung to their mother, pleading for her to desist. That I chuckled at the mischief, relieved that the ordeal was over, and everyone could unwind. "I hope you've arranged for help with unloading because the truck and trailer seem heavily loaded," I mentioned. Her face fell with a hint of sadness. "I had help with loading, but it's just us three for unloading. Let me assist, and if necessary, I can summon some friends to help." Her expression of deep gratitude was my reward as she thanked me earnestly. I proposed to tackle as much of the unloading as I could on my own, and then we would plan accordingly. The trio vanished into their storefront, and immediate cries of dismay echoed from inside. I entered the dimly lit room to find Sarah distressed, informing me the electricity was supposed to be active. I assured her I would handle it and stepped outside to contact a friend at the electric utility. After explaining the situation and the address, he recalled being assigned to install the meter but had found no one home, complying with company policy by leaving. He was slated to return the following Monday afternoon. "They're here now, and it's a lady with 2 young kids. You owe me a favor, so please come and install the meter, then work out the paperwork." He consented to arrive within an hour. After ending the call, I reassured Sarah that the electricity would be restored shortly. She expressed her gratitude, and the children erupted into cheers once more. Then I unlocked the trailer and started moving boxes into the barely illuminated area of the front room, aided by the rainy daylight. Sarah carried the smaller, lighter boxes inside, while the 2 children observed from under the awning, playfully disputing who would choose their bedroom first. Sarah shot me a knowing look as she caught me watching the kids. I reminded her to leave the heavier boxes to me, taking a bulky box from her to add to the indoor pile. Just as we finished unloading the truck, my friend John arrived in his utility truck. Within minutes, the store was lit up, energizing the children to scamper through each room, exploring. John returned to his vehicle to fetch the documents for Sarah to sign. "So, Jack, you've got everything unloaded?" asked John. "We're still working on the trailer," I answered. Without uttering another word, John walked over to the trailer, lifted a box, and began carrying it indoors. This inspired me to make several phone calls, and I suggested to Sarah and John that they take a break. We sat down, getting to know each other, and Sarah shared that she used to be a baker before opening her own small bakery back in Georgia. Before I could inquire how she managed to buy a storefront in this area, a group of friends arrived with their spouses and children, bringing pizza, beer for the adults, and soda for the children. More importantly, they came with the willingness to help. A flurry of activity followed as the trailer was emptied. My friends' spouses were shown around the store, a group of children ran around playing, and endless discussions on store layout strategies took place. Boxes were opened, and their contents were distributed to the appropriate areas. Shelving units were unloaded and assembled in the right spots. Then the front counter was adorned with a small display case, marking the completion of the truck's unloading. Afterwards, it was simply a time to relax and enjoy the company of friends. I was amazed at how quickly Sarah took to hosting a spontaneous gathering of people she had just met. I then realized her friendly demeanor was swiftly making her new friends as contact information was exchanged and lunch dates were set amongst the women. John leaned in, nudged me with his beer bottle, and whispered, "The thing these ladies have in common is you. Prepare for your ears to burn." I chuckled and then shared with him my idea for a renovation center. As we brainstormed, others joined in with their thoughts. There I was, conversing with the men, and Sarah chatting with the women. Occasionally, we would catch each other's gaze and smile. Gradually, the party wound down, and all the guests departed. Sarah let me carry the sleepy children upstairs to their beds, and she tucked them in, giving her sleeping angels a good-night kiss. Silently, we went downstairs and then outside to sit on the front steps. I offered her a beer, but she declined, so I opened the cold bottle for myself and took a long drink. We sat there in silence, just relaxing. "Jack, you're my hero. Thank you so much for everything you've done for us," Sarah said. "I'm just being a good neighbor." "There's no need for thanks," I replied. "That's nonsense," she insisted. "If it weren't for you, I'd still be stuck in my front yard with 2 upset children in a store without electricity. I owe you a lot." I laughed and responded, "Wait until you know me better," and took another gulp of my drink. Then, speaking of the truck, I asked, "What do you plan to do with it?" A distressed look crossed Sarah's face as she recounted the nightmare of driving across the country in the truck, how she endured impatient drivers honking at her whenever she had to stop for gas, food, or bathroom breaks. Her lack of experience driving a truck had led to several traffic snarls at gas stations, fast food outlets, and motels, where she often faced embarrassment and vulgar insults until she managed to resolve the situation. "And now I have to return the truck across the country," she lamented, explaining that the rental company demanded it be returned to their original location. That I put my hand on her shoulder, comforting her. "Sarah, I'll handle returning the truck for you." She looked at me astonished. "Jack, I can't let you do that." "Sarah, you can't put your children through another journey like that. I've got this. Don't worry about the truck. It's not as if I'm planning to abscond with it, and you know where to find me," I reasoned. She persisted in debating for a few more minutes until my reasoning prevailed, and she handed over all the lease documents. When she inquired about the commencement of my journey, I informed her it would be at approximately 9 a.m. She suggested that since I was departing so early, perhaps it was time to end the evening. As we got up, she spontaneously embraced me and pecked my cheek, saying good night before I had the chance to respond. She was already inside. I felt a pleasant warmth as I made my way back to my store. The following morning, I knocked on Sarah's door, and as she welcomed me, I was greeted by twin whirlwinds wrapping around my legs affectionately, calling me Mr. Jack. I chuckled, lifting them into my arms, and stepped inside. Sarah, with a hint of anxiety, passed me the keys along with an envelope stuffed with $20 bills, explaining it was for fuel and a bus fare for my return. "Jack, please take care," she urged as I started the truck. "Where are you returning it?" she queried. I grinned. "Sooner than you might assume," and headed towards the interstate. Just before reaching the ramp, I detoured into the local U-Haul center. Upon entering, I encountered the individual I sought to meet. "Hey Jack, what's happening?" greeted the store manager as we shook hands. "Hey Perry, I'm here to return a vehicle on behalf of a friend," I replied, handing over the documents. Perry reviewed them, noting, "Jack, this indicates it was meant to be a return journey rental. The vehicle and trailer are scheduled to return to Savannah." "Well, Perry, circumstances have shifted, and this needs to be converted into a one-way rental. I'm prepared to settle any additional costs for the amendment," I explained. As he made arrangements with the initial rental location, I noticed Perry's discussion becoming more heated, eventually exclaiming his determination to accept the trailer and truck, then slamming the phone down. Approaching me, he uttered, "Keep silent about this, Jack." I merely smiled, presented the keys, and as he examined the truck, I offered a credit card to cover the conversion from a round trip to a one-way rental. He issued a receipt, and, despite his earlier admonition, I expressed my gratitude. Subsequently, I stepped outside and hailed a cab. 30 minutes later, I alighted from the taxi in front of my store. By chance, Katie and Billy were playing outdoors upon spotting me. Their joyful shouts of "Mr. Jack" filled the air. Sarah emerged to investigate, her eyes widening in astonishment at my presence. "Please don't say you encountered an accident," she pleaded. That I reassured her with a laugh that I had just returned the truck and trailer to the nearby U-Haul facility. She looked puzzled. But at home, they insisted on a round-trip agreement for the rental. They wouldn't have leased it otherwise. When I spoke with the local U-Haul manager, he contacted them, clarified the situation, and secured their consent for him to accept the return. I explained. It was a fib, yet it harmed no one except the stubborn renters, and addressed the dilemma. Sarah beamed as I handed her the receipt confirming the transaction and returned the envelope of cash she had given me earlier that day. "Seems like you're immersed in fun," I remarked, noting her flour-dusted attire. She confessed to underestimating the challenges posed by setting up the bakery equipment. I offered my assistance if things became too overwhelming, then walked back to my place. Despite the morning's delay, I swiftly finished restoring Mrs. Abernathy's grandfather clock and began planning my next project. The therapeutic effect of the task was now juxtaposed with thoughts of the attractive blonde next door. Realizing I was humming, a sensation I hadn't experienced in a while, I was interrupted by a knock. Opening the door, I saw an anxious Sarah. "I've got a plumbing crisis. There's a leak under my sink. Can you assist?" "Let me grab some tools, and I'll head right over," I assured Sarah, quickly assembling the necessary equipment before heading to her store. Katie and Billy were waiting for me at the entrance and announced Mr. Jack's arrival loudly to everyone. They guided me to the small kitchen area in the back of the store, where I encountered Sarah zealously mopping up water with a towel, wringing it out over a bucket. Placing my tools aside, I crouched and shut off the water using the valve. I proceeded to inspect the sink, which unfortunately caused more water to seep from the pipes. I assured Sarah that I would take over from there. She stepped back, attempting to discreetly wipe flour from her apron, hoping I wouldn't notice. I acted as though I hadn't seen her as she moved past me to stand at the entrance. With experience, I swiftly detached the sink's trap and found the source of the leak, a corroded washer. I took out a new washer from my own stock of repair items. Throughout, I explained each step to Sarah. I applied plumber's tape around the threads, reassembled the trap, and carefully tightened it to the perfect tension, not too loose to leak, not too tight to crack the old pipes. I jokingly asked Sarah to turn on the faucet, explaining that her doing so would test if I'd fixed it correctly while I watched for leaks. An amusing thought crossed my mind as I lay under the sink, watching the joints. After ensuring there were no leaks, I asked her to shut off the water so I could make a final adjustment. Once it was secure, I turned the water back on and tested the flow and drainage, which worked perfectly without any leaks. Sarah cheered in triumph. The final steps were just cleaning up. Sarah attempted to hug me, but I pointed out my wet clothes. She offered to wash them, but I reminded her it would leave me without anything to wear, causing her to blush. She suggested treating me to a meal, but without a car, she hadn't been able to buy groceries. They had been relying on takeout while she focused on setting up the bakery equipment. I offered to go home, get cleaned up, and take them out for dinner. She worried it was too much imposition, but I insisted it was fine and promised to pick them up at 6 p.m. Come 6 p.m., I arrived at their place, and they approached my car. Sarah was surprised to see that I had bought 2 booster seats for Katie and Billy. After getting the kids settled, we headed to a lovely Italian eatery. The evening was spent getting to know my new neighbors, with Katie and Billy eagerly sharing stories. Sarah simply smiled as her children endeared themselves to me. Occasionally, they shared something private, making Sarah blush and quickly changed the subject. After dinner, I took them for ice cream at a spot with a play area for children. We observed them mingling with other children playing. The pure affection on Sarah's face as she watched her kids was a sight that has inspired artists for ages. She caught me looking and shifted her attention to me. "So, you like kids, Jack Thompson?" she asked with a small smile. "I do," I replied honestly. "Reminds me of when mine were that age." An awkward silence fell between us, and she tentatively asked about my children. I found myself opening up about Emily and Matt, sharing photos from my wallet of them when they were younger, carefully avoiding any bitterness as I explained they lived with their mother in Davenport. The conversation drifted into various topics, including the reason behind Sarah's lack of a car. She clarified that her old sedan had broken down just before the move, and with all her savings going into the bakery, she hadn't been able to replace it yet. Until she could afford one, they planned to use delivery services and taxis. Why not just use mine? I offered. I hardly use it since I mostly drive my truck after hours, and I live right across the street. After some discussion, I managed to persuade her that borrowing my car was the most cost-effective solution for her situation. When we began our journey home, the children quickly fell asleep, exhausted from their activities. Along the way, I showed Sarah the various functions and features of the car while she absorbed the information quietly. I parked in front of her store, and I carried Katie inside as Sarah unlocked the door. I placed her on the bed, and Sarah started to tuck her in. After fetching Billy, Sarah was there as I settled him into bed. She cared for him attentively, and I realized I missed that aspect of family life. My sadness was apparent, and Sarah looked at me concernedly. I reassured her I was fine, though she seemed to sense otherwise. As I handed her my car keys, she tenderly caressed my cheek, stood on her tiptoes, and gave me a gentle goodnight kiss. I felt as if I floated all the way back to my place. Monday saw me back at work, unable to focus, my thoughts lingering on Sarah. I shut down the register and tackled various chores around the store, including rearranging the display of specialty wood stains and finishes. Thus, it turned out to be a productive day as my list of store improvements gradually shortened. It wasn't about seeing the end of the tunnel, but rather moving forward regardless. I heard Sarah's voice outside before a knock came. Opening the door, she greeted me, inviting me to join them for dinner. After requesting 15 minutes to shower, I was told they'd wait. The dining table in her small apartment above the bakery boasted fried chicken, mashed potatoes, biscuits with gravy, corn, and black-eyed peas, complemented by the aroma of warm apple pie. The children debated sitting next to me, resolved by Sarah suggesting I sit at the table's head with the kids on either side and Sarah across. After giving thanks, we indulged in the meal. I savored every bite, including a hefty piece of apple pie, to the point of fullness. Later, I was roped into playing several games with the children until their bedtime at 9 p.m., when they headed upstairs, followed by Sarah. She paused to invite me up, and I read Billy a bedtime story while Sarah did the same for Katie. Once the children were asleep, we sneaked downstairs, where Sarah brewed coffee as we tidied up after the meal. She prepared a large ceramic mug for me. Upon learning I preferred my coffee black, she added cream to hers with a playful grimace. Mug in hand, we stepped outside to the small balcony. It was a pleasantly mild November evening. As we sipped the steaming coffee, we started discussing Katie and Billy, and before I realized it, I was sharing stories about Emily and Matt. Then the floodgates opened as I recounted the disastrous state of my family and my life. When I finished, Sarah's eyes welled up with tears of sympathy for me, and she laid her head on my chest, offering comfort. It was comforting to have someone who could empathize with what I had been experiencing. Then, in a gentle, quiet voice, she shared what led her and her children across the country. She had enjoyed a typical childhood in a small Georgia town, was a cheerleader, and married her high school sweetheart after he returned from military service. They saved enough to start a small bakery, and their family grew with the birth of their children. However, at some point, things went awry. Her husband developed a gambling problem, which escalated into debt and dangerous associations. The arguments turned physical. Fortunately, the children were too young to grasp the turmoil. The possibility of divorce became a frequent topic in Sarah and her husband's discussions. Then a tragic call came one night from the police. Her husband had been killed in a bar fight over a gambling debt. From there, it was a nightmarish ordeal. Sarah was left with the bakery and mounting debts her husband had hidden from her. The loan sharks started threatening her, and she was forced to sell the bakery to pay them off. With what little remained, she decided on a fresh start. She chose our town after researching various parts of the country, using all her resources to lease the storefront with living space above. Now she was left with the hope of building a new bakery business and a meager savings account which she would need to tap into for expenses until the bakery began generating income. Unexpected startup costs had also drained her savings, yet she had no regrets about her move. We sat in silence, reflecting as the night air grew cooler. Then I offered to look over her business plan, confident I could offer some suggestions based on my experience running a small business in town. She fetched the files, and I promised to review them overnight. She asked me to return them the following evening when we would have dinner again. After a goodnight kiss and returning home, I scrutinized her business plan and noted several areas where she could optimize her approach. The bakery concept was solid, but I saw opportunities for her to connect with local businesses for regular orders and potentially share space with my hardware store for a coffee corner, benefiting us both. I was certain she could achieve a sustainable business within 6 months with the right approach. Preparing my notes for Sarah, I still thought about her kiss. Dinner at Sarah's included delicious food, children's games, and bedtime stories. This time I read to Katie, wished her a good night, and prepared for a colder evening indoors. Needing the table for my analysis and projections for Sarah, I had everything ready as she came down, and we made another pot of coffee. She inquired what I had discovered. I informed her of my observations and offered my assistance. As I started to elaborate, she moved towards her small living room. Curious, I questioned if something was amiss. She reassured me nothing was wrong, expressing her trust in me, thus negating the need for extensive explanations. She suggested we head to the living room to unwind. Following her, we settled in for a conversation that lasted into the night. As the warmth of the small space enveloped us, I acknowledged that despite our brief acquaintance, the comfort I felt with Sarah surpassed that with Karen after years together. After a goodnight kiss, I left with her authorization to help refine her business plan and an open invitation for dinner upon awakening. I set about securing Sarah's business well-being. I contacted several local businesses I had good relationships with, suggesting they consider ordering from the new bakery. The cafe across the square, the community center, and even the teacher's lounge at the elementary school were receptive to the idea of fresh-baked goods delivered daily. I also sketched plans for a small coffee and pastry corner in my hardware store, where customers could enjoy a treat while waiting for keys to be cut or small repairs to be completed. By day's end, I was content with my achievements. Dinner next door was a joyful affair. When I attempted to discuss the day's events, Sarah interjected, assuring me of her trust and dismissing the need for daily updates. Hence, I persisted with helping her establish connections in town, enjoying her company nightly. Weekends transitioned from solitary home improvements to exploring the town with Sarah and her children. However, this wasn't entirely accurate, as I also assisted with setup at Sarah's bakery, applying my skills to propose various solutions for her to choose from. Our relationship's pace was dictated by Sarah, evolving from kisses to more intimate moments once the children were asleep, maintaining boundaries she felt comfortable with. The arrival of Sarah's brother Ray and his family for a visit marked a new chapter. As we barbecued steaks on the small grill on her balcony, I sought to make a genuine impression, knowing Sarah would value his opinion. I openly expressed my care for Sarah and the children, acknowledging the importance of his perspective. Despite our recent acquaintance, Ray recognized my support for Sarah and the children from the start, affirming our compatibility but cautioning me about his sister's fragility after all she'd been through. Our mutual understanding was sealed as we clinked beer bottles and brought the steaks indoors. After dinner, Billy and Katie escorted their cousins upstairs to show them their toys, while Sarah and I conversed with Ray and his spouse. Our discussion evolved to a point where Ray and Sarah started sharing awkward moments from their youth. Sarah would laugh loudly in playful objection as Ray kept going. Through the evening, eventually, Ray glanced at his wife and suggested, "Sweetheart, let's put the kids to bed and then head to sleep ourselves. It's been a long drive." With this suggestion in the atmosphere, we all bid each other good night. Quietly, Sarah and I joined hands as we made our way across the street to my apartment above the hardware store. We experienced the most passionate and unforgettable night together. I'm unsure how long we spent basking in the satisfaction afterward, but soon we both realized that our exertions had made us hungry. As we chuckled and got up from the bed, I grabbed my shorts and was about to put on my t-shirt when Sarah mentioned she had claimed it as her attire. I felt a surge of affection for her as she teasingly wore my shirt like a dress, and we headed downstairs to raid the fridge. Every look I took of her at the kitchen table, sitting with her legs casually propped up, wearing nothing but my t-shirt, intensified my desire for her. I scooped her into my arms and carried her back to my bedroom. As I gazed in wonder at her, I knew I was ready to do anything for her, to defend her fiercely, ensuring nothing would ever separate us. It was in this moment of unexpected joy I recognized the distinction between Karen and Sarah, between grief and hope. The era of grieving the past and immersing myself in work was concluded. It was time to embrace life anew. I nestled close to Sarah, draping my arm over her as a shield through the night. We both sensed the promise of a joyous morning ahead. After sharing a goodnight kiss, we drifted off to sleep. Time flew until one day, the bell above the hardware store door chimed unexpectedly, revealing Karen, her companion Brad Wilson alongside Emily and Matt. I had somewhat anticipated their return, informed by rumors of ValueMart's plans to expand their local operation. Karen expressed she had a proposal for me, awaiting my reaction with an envelope in hand. With the door shut behind them, their unease was palpable given my lack of hospitality. After a brief silence, since I felt no compulsion to speak to them, Karen overcame the awkwardness. She admitted her mishandling of our past and expressed a desire for reconciliation of sorts. It emerged that Brad was the school administrator she had met during her teacher training days, igniting a relationship unbeknownst to me. Karen had continued her liaison with him, admitting their relationship had developed while I was focused on running the struggling hardware store. Karen hoped I'd understand the children's wish to connect with Brad as a father figure since I had been emotionally absent during their formative years. As she spoke, I managed to keep my anger in check, silently listening to her justify her actions as being in the best interest of the children, especially after my business had plateaued, leading her to seek the best possible outcome for her children through divorce. This was the reason she had demanded half of the profits from the sale of the house despite the fact that I had been the one to make all the mortgage payments. Now to the heart of the matter. The family was planning to relocate permanently to Oak Ridge as Brad had been promoted to regional director for ValueMart, overseeing the store expansion. News had reached as far as Davenport about the recent revitalization of the downtown area where my hardware store was located. Everyone was eager to be part of the town's renaissance. Karen was aware that I had been struggling with the hardware store following our divorce, and as a result could not afford to expand as ValueMart could. She offered to transfer a portion of their moving allowance to me, a cashier's check for $50,000. All I needed to do was to agree to sell my store property to ValueMart for their expansion, and we would be square. I remained silent as she waved the check, her arm eventually lowering as my silence persisted. I gently asked them to enter further into the store, and I thought I detected smug smiles on their faces as they did so. They were audibly surprised upon seeing the freshly renovated space, illuminated by modern track lighting. I described in detail the work I had done to restore the store to its former charm while updating it for modern customers. Next, I guided them to the new DIY workshop area where the room's fine details were complemented by top-quality tools displayed on custom racks. I elaborated on my renovation efforts for each section of the store, which they observed with astonishment, appreciating the transformation of my business. The sight of the coffee corner, showcasing Sarah's fresh pastries, elicited gasps from Emily. She had always loved baking but was discouraged from messy hobbies by her mother. She touched one of the display cases wistfully as we moved on. We then ascended to my renovated apartment, now spacious and inviting with modern furnishings complementing the historic character of the building. I showed them through each room, eventually arriving at my home office. I spoke about the reclaimed wood desk and my search for the right furnishings to match the decor. I indicated the business improvement plans on the wall as my dog, a rescue golden retriever named Buddy, came to sit beside me. Karen, who had always disliked dogs, looked around disapprovingly, but her preferences were of no concern to me now. After the tour, I questioned whether they truly believed I would consider selling my revitalized business to make way for their corporate expansion. Before anyone could reply, the back door opened, and Sarah's children burst in excitedly. "Daddy, we made more cookies for the store," Billy exclaimed. "It's not made, It's baked, Katie corrected him without dampening his enthusiasm. They proceeded to show off the tray of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies, with Billy concluding, "But, Daddy, Mom says we need to make more money ones too." A sentiment Katie echoed, referring to the specialty butterscotch cookies that had become a customer favorite. Karen, taken aback by the sudden interruption, received no explanation from me as my pregnant fiancée, Sarah, appeared, wondering about our visitors. I hurried over to her, inquiring about her well-being and guiding her to a seat, rewarded by her affectionate smile and a kiss. I then announced, "They're not guests. They are just leaving." As they departed, I was aware they had countless questions that would never receive answers. Questions such as how I had transformed the failing hardware store into a thriving community hub with a renovation center, tool rental service, DIY workshops, and a popular coffee corner featuring Sarah's baked goods. They would never know how I had secured a small business development loan after presenting a solid business plan to the bank, or how the town council had approved tax incentives for downtown revitalization that benefited local businesses like mine. The renovation process became a significant part of my healing, as did meeting Sarah, whose bakery Sweet Foundations shared a connecting door with my hardware store, Thompson's Home Solutions. This partnership had become the talk of the town, proving that small businesses could thrive even in the shadow of retail giants through specialization and community connection. Soon after their visit, I learned that ValueMart's expansion plans had been denied by the town council after a community campaign highlighted the importance of preserving the town's character and supporting small businesses. Brad and Karen's corporate plans were thwarted, and they were forced to adapt to the town's vision rather than impose their own. Brad was eventually reassigned to another region, their stay in Oak Ridge much briefer than anticipated. Meanwhile, my relationship with Emily and Matt slowly began to heal. Initially drawn by curiosity about their half-siblings-to-be, when Sarah and I announced our pregnancy, they started visiting more frequently. During these visits, we carefully rebuilt our connection, focusing on the future rather than the painful past. 6 months later, as I stood next to Sarah in the hospital room, holding our newborn son James, with Katie and Billy excitedly peering at their new brother, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Emily and Matt stood awkwardly by the door, having driven in from Davenport for the birth, a sign of the gradual thaw in our relationship. The hardware store was thriving, Sarah's bakery had become a town favorite, and our blended family was finding its rhythm. What had once been a desperate attempt to keep busy enough to avoid sorrow had become a life filled with purpose and joy. As I cradled James, I caught Sarah's eye and smiled. She returned it with a look of such deep affection that I knew, whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. From the depths of betrayal and loss had come a second chance I never expected, a hardware store's rebirth that mirrored my own.